The grand finale at the Republican National Convention, Hurricane Laura the day after, devastation across the Louisiana coast. But did we actually dodge a bullet? And Love Hate 8 to end a busy, busy week. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Friday, August 28th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Bersano. Hey, Carlo.
Hey, Wags. How are you? Welcome to Friday. We made it.
All right, Carlo, a really, really busy week in terms of news. So let's just dive right in here. President Trump accepted his party's nomination for a second term in a 70-minute speech from the White House, in which he called Joe Biden, quote, the destroyer of American greatness, who is in lockstep with a far left ideology. The president also misrepresented his administration's coronavirus response. This all went down in front of about 1,500 spectators who were mostly not wearing face masks on the South Lawn. HHS Secretary Azar, I think he was the only cabinet member, at least that I saw, wearing a mask. The convention ended with a fireworks display over the Washington Monument that spelled out Trump 2020 in red, white, and blue.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So first of all, these things aren't supposed to happen on the White House grounds. We should just, mention that once again. Though I don't know if it matters to anybody at this point. I think, the whole thing in retrospect, the whole week is very baffling to me, Jill. It felt like in totality that the GOP set up to run this campaign against Bernie Sanders and then just didn't really change anything when it ended up being Joe Biden getting the nomination. Time will tell. I think if these attacks on Biden stick, this is, of course, when things really get interesting, right? Labor Day's next weekend. This is when people really start tuning in, paying attention, when the money starts really flowing in the ads. I continue to think that it's going to be very difficult to paint Joe Biden as this left-wing ideologue, just because he's just not that. And if you're even paying a little bit of attention, it's pretty obvious that he's not that. But I also, I remember thinking when I was in college in 2004 that it was nuts that the Bush campaign was going after John Kerry for his service in Vietnam, given that Bush didn't serve. So I remember thinking that's never going to work. That's going to just backfire. And it didn't at all. So again, no, absolutely nothing. It's just my thinking. I was also amazed all week at just the grievance politics, right? It felt like we didn't hear much in the way of what President Trump would do in a second term. There's a lot about, why he needs to win to sort of own the libs and the media. I think that was an effective strategy. I mean, it was clearly an effective strategy in 2016. But again, and I said this 100 times now, but it just doesn't seem effective when you're the party in power. It makes you sort of look impotent, to me at least. It's you're in power, guys. Why are you so angry and aggrieved about everything? You're the most powerful, people on earth right now. It just, to me, I don't get it. But again, I'll say it again. I'm not the target audience.
Andrea Mitchell, just on this thing that you first mentioned about the fact that this happened at the White House. Andrea Mitchell from NBC, who's covered politics for years, she tweeted something I never thought I'd see: a political convention ready to gavel in at the White House. Again, no one seems to care at this point. And I think if you like the president, you like him, and it doesn't matter. I happen to think that message does resonate, though, Carlo, as you were mentioning. I think with swing voters. I think that law and order message, I think painting the Democrats and Joe Biden as being super, super left wing, I do think that is probably going to sway some voters. On the same day, though, that the president delivered his convention's keynote, several dozen former staffers of John McCain, Mitt Romney, and George W. Bush, those are three Republicans, about 150 in all, signed open letters supporting Joe Biden, saying that even though they disagree with some of his policy positions, they say that reelecting Trump threatens to, quote, irreparably damage American democracy.
Yes, this is the kind of thing that in any other, in any other election year would be like jaw dropping, right? I'm very curious to see if this kind of thing makes any difference with those swing voters you just mentioned, Jill. I don't know. It's utterly unheard of, for the record, for being if you're like a lifelong party operative, your whole life, working for sort of like a Republican, elder statesmen like Bush and Romney and McCain, and endorsing the candidate of the other party. Like that does not happen. And it's not like it's just one spurned guy. I mean, you said it's over 150 of these guys. So again, it seems like that's the kind of thing that would have an effect on people on the fence. But I guess time will tell, right?
We shall see. The Lincoln Project, that's their goal too, right? It's Republicans who just do
Hmm.
not like Trump. And they've been putting out ads that are really effective. So we'll see. I mean, this election, if someone told me it's going to be a blowout either way, I'd say great. I could see that. If somebody told me it's going to be super close and we're not going to have we're not going to know, and we're going to need to do a recount, I can see that happening. I think that
Oh,
we're a long way from obviously
recounts,
knowing
Jill.
how this is going to turn out.
You just said recount, and
It's
I just
happened
like,
before.
oh God.
It is let's switch gears because I want to get to Hurricane Laura. It is the day after Hurricane Laura. We're now getting a pretty good picture of some of the damage. So the storm devastated a really large portion of southwestern Louisiana, the coastline there. At least 6 people are dead, mostly from falling trees. So the big worry ahead of the storm that we talked about yesterday was the storm surge. So that was not as bad as feared. It ended up being about 9 feet. That's about half of the worst case
Yeah.
models. Some had them as high as 20, 24 feet. But it was actually the winds that ended up causing the most damage. Lake Charles appears to have taken the brunt of the direct hit. A chemical plant was damaged and is spewing dangerous chlorine gas into the air. About 1 million homes and businesses are without power in the region. Temperatures are running extremely hot and humid. President Trump is going to be traveling to Louisiana to tour the storm damage this weekend.
So this thing is now I'm just looking at the map now. It's now a tropical depression. It's over sort of like Missouri and Arkansas. And the path has this thing bringing heavy rains to the mid-Atlantic today and tomorrow. Yeah, I hate to say like we dodged a bullet, because I'm sure that if you're in Lake Charles and your home was wiped out, or God forbid, somebody who passed away, I'm sure it doesn't feel like that. But just based on having covered these, I had a really bad feeling in my stomach this time yesterday morning, Jill, and I don't have that anymore. It does seem like it wasn't as bad as feared. The storm surge alone, I mean, 9 feet is nothing to shake a stick at, right? But 20 feet is seriously devastating. They were talking about that storm surge going 20, 30 miles in up the coast, right? And that didn't happen. So that's good. It's also amazing with these things, right? Sorry I was just thinking, like, it's amazing that even in this day and age, we still don't really know. Like, we didn't think it was going to be a wind event, and it ended up being a wind event, right?
It's always a little different than they predict. The
Mm.
forecasters were pretty good though in terms of where it was going to hit,
Yeah.
and when. They almost had it 2 days before down to the exact hour, which was about 1, 2 a.m., and pretty much within a couple miles of where. But one of the reasons that the storm surge was not as bad as expected is because the storm moved pretty quickly, which didn't allow for as much time for that water to really
Oh,
build up. It
interesting.
moved at about 15 miles per hour, which is pretty quick. That's like if you yeah, that's you can imagine if you were riding your bike. That's how this
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
reporter from ABC described it. In terms of the wind, that reporter for ABC News said it was like a tornado was coming through, and you know
Hmm.
what kind of damage a tornado does, right? But
Oh,
instead
yeah.
of traveling on a very specific path, which is what you see, like with the tornado, you have one house destroyed, but then the house next to it is fine.
Right.
This was that level of wind strength, but just across the entire region.
And that jives with the pictures that I was just looking at. It looks, I mean, some of these, houses and office towers look like a tornado came through. So that totally makes sense.
All right, let's talk now about what's going on with the NBA. Players have now voted to resume playoff basketball a day after the players on the Bucks led a boycott. It was really a wildcat strike, actually, over the Jacob Blake shooting that rippled throughout professional sports. Postseason action from the bubble will restart today. The timing is still TBD, but this was big news. The players met and decided that they do want to move forward with games.
Yeah, ESPN is reporting that Michael Jordan actually was sort of like the go-between the players and the owners to try and get them to a
Oh,
place where they
really?
could, yeah, which makes sense. I mean, he's obviously an elder statesman of the sport, and he's also the owner of the, oh God, he owns a small market team, or he's the man. I don't know. He's in the front office of a small market NBA team. The Bobcats, are they still the Bobcats? Still a team? Anyway, so he has a lot of sway both with the front office of the NBA and obviously the players. So that was an interesting report in ESPN. Just on the social justice angle, Jill, I did want to mention the crowds are expected to be very large in Washington today for the 57th commemoration of the March on Washington. Today is the anniversary of the famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Al Sharpton, the Reverend, he announced back at George Floyd's funeral earlier this summer that he is leading this year's march, which of course comes at this very fraught moment in this country with race relations. I think police reform likely going to be the big rallying cry this year, and we actually have Martin Luther King Jr. the third on Cheddar today from the march to talk about it. It'll be interesting to hear what he has to say.
Um, Very. I'm interviewing the head of the NAACP, I believe on Wake Up with Cheddar at the end
Oh
of the
yeah,
show today. So
this isn't this.
excited to
I,
kind of
I
hear what
went
they're
to this.
expecting.
I went to the 50th when I was at NBC. I covered the 50th anniversary, and it was remarkable. It really was. And then you had the just to like look out on the mall and sort of picture 50 years ago when there were all of those people there. I don't know. I just thought it was really moving.
The White House, switching gears, talk about a coronavirus. The White House has announced that the federal government is going to spend $750 million to acquire 150 million rapid antigen tests made by Abbott Labs. We talked about this yesterday. It comes after the FDA granted approval for that 15-minute test. This, like we talked about, could be a potential game changer. Just when you think about ramping up testing and having very quick results to find out if somebody has it.
Let's hope so. I read a story this morning. Abbott is hiring like crazy at their facilities in Illinois to get these tests, to scale these tests up and get them out the door. So, they're taking this very seriously. They want these tests everywhere they can get them. The only thing I was thinking about with this is, 150 million obviously is a huge number. But it's not really that much when you're talking about the mass testing that we really need, right? When you're real mass testing, when you're talking about testing anybody going through like an office or a school or a gymnasium or a restaurant or whatever, I mean, you're talking about hundreds of millions of tests a week, right? I don't know. I haven't heard enough on this to know. It seems like a really big number, and it is, but it's less than half of the U.S. population, right? You could test half the U.S. population one time. Right.
And look, it can't hurt to have this opportunity to get more testing out there. But we've used the term game changer. I think we may be using it too liberally, actually.
Yeah. No, you're probably.
And I think that's to your point of like, maybe it's not going to be a game changer because they just may not have enough. It's a game changer if you give it to every kid who's entering school, and you do it before they walk in.
Right.
And then you have a normal school situation and parents can feel like they can send their kids back safely. It's a game changer if you do it on college campuses, ahead of people walking into the office every single day.
Right.
Or every week even. That's when it's a game changer. So
yeah, no, you're right.
And that's a pretty good segue, because we wanted to mention yesterday, we mentioned yesterday, excuse me, that we wanted to revisit this debate that's happening about colleges right now. We got a ton of great emails on the subject from a lot of listeners who know more about this than we do, because, of course, a lot of your families are actually dealing with it, instead of just Carlo and I blabbing about it. So one of our we wanted to just kind of let you guys know what some listeners had to say. So one of our regular listeners, Jan, wrote in about just how hard this school year has been on her sons, including one who had dreamed his whole life about playing college football and now may have missed his chance. So we've talked about just the kids who are so good that they're going to get drafted, and what
Right.
this means for them. But in many cases, those players are going to be just fine. They're still going to get drafted and they're still going to have,
Right.
they're going to still play professional football. But for her son, college football was going to be the pinnacle of his athletic career, and he probably won't have that chance. She also showed us this really, a picture of this really great sign that's all over one of her son's campuses. It says, "Cover your face so you don't have to move back into your parents' place."
I love that.
If
I
that
forgot about
doesn't do it, I don't know what will.
that should scare the bejesus out of any college student, right? I also thought Sean, one of our listeners, he made a great point. He was talking about how we're not trying to get to COVID zero, right? Like we're way past that. Maybe that would have been the goal, months ago. But that was never really the goal. We've kind of had this mission creep seep in. We tried to flatten the curve, and we have flattened the curve, and then it rose back up, and now it's flattening again. But what I mean to say is, like, he talked about his daughter, who I believe is at Elon, down south, and they have, the students have real-time dashboards of cases on campus. They have safety protocol alerts, coming to their phones. They have it together there, and she made the decision, this woman, as an adult, that she wanted to go to college, and she accepted the risk. The only issue there is, like, it makes it more difficult because you can accept the risk, still get sick, and spread it. So I understand that that's what makes this a little bit of a, harder than just like an individual choice. But it also made me think about something that Jonathan wrote about how there's all these markers of time that we're kind of like missing this year, right? And college is one of those. You're only in college for 4 years, and that just goes back to this thing we were talking about the other day about, like, should we really be blaming 18-year-olds for, like, hanging out at frat parties and playing beer pong? It's a great debate, and it's really interesting to hear from these guys about it.
One of our listeners, Michael, mentioned we talked about how Alabama had 500 cases, but we didn't put this into context that about 39,000 people go there, which is a really fair point. It's not a great positive percentage, but it's also not, the 500 number might overplay it. But I would also venture to say that there's a lot more than 500 cases. That's just what they know about.
Yeah, that's also a good point. Again, not to go back to this, it's the blaming of the students for attempting to have the college experience that they paid for because the schools reopened is really the only thing that just kind of upsets me. If you're going to reopen a college, like,
but why can't you blame Carlo? Okay, finish.
No,
finish what you're.
Well, I was just going to say, like, if you're going to reopen a school, right, explain that you do it because you're a for-profit institution, or you need the money. You have a lot of overhead, right? Everyone is aware of the risk involved. I just think, like, fining a freshman for playing beer pong at the at an off-campus house is just dumb. But I do, Jill, go ahead before I continue.
No, it's okay. No. I feel like I'm going to go on this. I don't want to be on this high horse, but I think that idea of, that sign was exactly right, which is put a mask on your face so you don't have to move back to your parents' place. Okay. Again, this whole situation stinks for everybody right now, every age group. Is some semblance of a college experience better than none and moving home? And one thing that Jan wrote us, which I thought as part of her email, was she said, her son doesn't party and he's trying to follow the rules, but his roommate does, and comes home and they're breathing the same air in the small room. I had a roommate in a room that was like 10 by 10.
If they get sick, you get sick immediately.
Exactly. So why can't you say, guys, don't party for a few months? I don't know. And I may be being naive as somebody who very much enjoyed the partying in college. But and that's why it's like I did. I loved it. I absolutely loved
feel
college.
Like, we would have we missed each other by a couple of years, but we would have, I think, been really good friends in college. I feel like we had the same sort of outlook on life back then. But look, it's a great debate, and I totally hear where you're coming from. I really do. I do want to mention, though, a success story that I read about yesterday. The University of Arizona caught an outbreak early in a dorm, and they snuffed it out by testing the wastewater, right, the poop from a dorm, where the school then tested every resident of that dorm and found 2 positive cases. They quarantined them. That's what I'm talking about, baby. Like we talk about, creativity and people doing, people rising to the occasion. I love that story. Like shout out to you of Arizona. That's amazing. Like that's the kind of stuff I want to see more of.
That's awesome. That's the first
Yeah.
time I'm hearing about it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, we're almost out of time. We want to finish this quickly with some love, hate, 8. It's a Friday. I'm going to start. One thing that we love, talking on the phone. It's our new old thing that provides some comfort during this pandemic. It's more personal than a text message, but more private than a video call. And yet you don't need to change out of your PJs. So I love it. I've been doing it a lot. Carlo, you and I have been chatting on the phone. I've been chatting with some friends. I called our assignment manager, Tony Marco, on the phone the other day because we were going back and forth about something over Slack or email. And I just was like, you know what? I'm just going to call him. And he was like, it is so nice to hear your voice. Like we were just chatting, and we wound up having a really nice conversation and about personal stuff too. And it's like, this is the stuff that we would have normally done in the office, we in the cafeteria or in the kitchen, that you just don't get over email or text or Slack.
No, totally. I think you and my parents are the only people I talk to on the phone to still.
I feel like, do you see my my phone number coming up and just roll your eyes? I feel like it's kind of one-way calls where I'm
not
calling
at all.
you.
No, not at all. I've called you before. Okay, one thing that we hate, annoyingly loud or difficult to open food packaging, which is something that I've been struggling with over here. This is including, but not limited to, cereals, cookies, chips, probably the worst offenders, which of course are all things that you're trying to sneak without waking up the entire house, right? And I'm sure you deal with this more, given that you have a toddler running around. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do, and I eat these chips that my husband tells me he can hear from when we were in our apartment. If he was in the bedroom and I was in the kitchen, he'd be like, chomp, chomp. That's what he'd say, because he said that I would be eating them so loudly. But yes, the packaging is brutal. Why does it need to be so hard to open up a thing of cookies or something?
Well, that brings me to the one thing we ate, which is half of one of those trays of Oreos that you have to access by like ripping open the flap on the wrapper. You know what I'm talking about? It's like,
yeah,
it might as well be like a car horn going off. That access flap has some positives because it keeps the package from getting stale, which is good. I remember in the old days, cookies didn't have that. You open a cookie package, you got to finish that thing in one sitting. But the problem is it also leaves like a third of the Oreo sort of inaccessible, and it's also very loud. Again, I'm trying to sneak these without my wife, hearing me here.
Well, it's like a blowhorn.
Yeah, this is not a sanctioned snacking here.
Okay, we've got to leave it there. It is Friday, and that is what you need to know for August 28th.
Great weekend, everybody.
Bye, everyone.